Goodson? Chair Conley? Board Member Woodson? And then no Byram today.
Bring up.
Yes, so one is a pretty small note. It's on the sub-recipient agreement with Butte County. Just under the signature line, it has where you're supposed to sign, it has Board of Supervisors on there. And so we're just going to change that to GSA Board Chair. So that's a small change. And then the second is going to be on the contract with Stantec to prepare the tax roll. Of the many little packets I gave you, it's this one on the last couple of pages. Some of those changes just have to do with the scope of work. It's really more about wording to ensure that we have flexibility within the certain tasks. But it's not any big changes as much as just the ability to be flexible on how they go and determining how they go about the tax roll dependent on the user classification. So.
Any questions or comments by board members? Any public comment on the consent agenda? I'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
That's where you say second. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
Can you tell me who seconded? I got it.
Okay. We're on the regular agenda, 5.1, presentation of the Wyandotte Creek Subbasin Status Report. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Conley, members of the board. Kelly Peterson here again. Good to see you. I think they only let me come talk to you about once a year or so, but I love coming back here because I have good news and a new product that we have been working on for the last year. So I've got a copy of that in front of you. I think everyone in the audience has a copy, and we have we're just going to go through it page by page with a couple of highlights from each. But this is really based on those very technical reports that we do every year, the annual reports. And so we tried to make this into a very easy to read, tangible product with colors, graphs, something that you could use for your constituents as you talk to them about your subbasin each year and the status of it, as well as the advisory committee members. So those folks that are advising you on members and things that you're working on can also go out and talk to their groups using these as a product of that. So today, like I said, I'll just highlight a few things from each of the pages, and then I'll open it up for any questions. So instead of a lengthy 30-minute PowerPoint presentation, this will probably wrap up in about 5 or 10 minutes. The next step for this also is going to be providing the same format presentation to your Wyandotte Creek Advisory Committee member and also get feedback from them. So looking at the first page, what we've done is pretty much just outline a map of the subbasin, get people oriented to the subbasin itself. We're kind of highlighting what the GSA does in that first paragraph and what it's required to do. We also mentioned the GSP, so folks can get a little bit of an introduction to that. And also highlighting that sustainability of groundwater in the subbasin is a goal out in 2042. So we're working towards that longer term goal. It does highlight the goals of the GSP, which is to ensure that groundwater is managed to provide a supply of adequate quality and quantity to all the constituents. So to support rural areas, agricultural economic base of the region, and the environmental uses within the subbasin. We do touch on how the GSP can be amended, and then every 5 years it goes through that 5-year periodic evaluation. But it also highlights how we are really trying to convey the information from the annual report. And so here we are in 2025. This annual report is looking back at the previous water year of 2024, which spans from October 1st of 23 through that big wet cycle and into September of 24. So over on that right teal, we talk about a quick overview of the hydrological conditions of that year, which really play into groundwater conditions. So if you have a really wet year versus a really dry year, it kind of outlines that. 2024 was what's considered an above normal year. It was the second non-dry year in a row, which is great for us. We haven't really seen that since 2006, where we've got these back-to-back, wetter type years. So we did see some rebounds in groundwater levels. And in those wetter type years, we see less demand for groundwater use for two reasons. One, we've got a lot of rain. We've got a lot of precipitation that falls on the land. And we also have a reduced pressure for need to pump that groundwater because of available surface water supplies that are coming down our creeks and rivers. And so that kind of plays twofold into the groundwater conditions. So, second page, we'll dive into the water use in the subbasin, which kind of looks at the total groundwater use and then breaks it out by a percentage of groundwater versus surface water in the subbasin. And so there's a typo, I'll fix that. The surface water comes from supplies from the Feather River and Honkin Creek. And it's mainly used by the agricultural communities. You can see in that lower pie chart, 97% of the groundwater is used by ag, and a small percentage by municipal and rural residential. Those municipal providers, as you know, is Cal Water, South Feather Water and Power, and Thermalito Water and Sewer District. And then the line chart there in the middle kind of gives you an idea of the breakdown of surface water to groundwater use throughout the last 4 years, so you can see how things are lining up. It's very similar to last year. And as you can see back in 2022, the drought year, we had higher use of that groundwater and less of the surface water due to availability. So then we go down into groundwater levels and provide a map there that from this spring, or last spring to this spring, we saw about a foot increase in groundwater levels throughout the subbasin, which is a good thing. And if we were just to look at the fall levels, which is generally the lowest that groundwater levels will be, we were still sitting about 12 feet higher than what the subbasin has deemed as measurable objectives for our wells that we say these are our representative wells. So we're sitting pretty good in that regard as well too. This subbasin, as you know, is generally pretty stable. It's got shallow groundwater conditions. And it's mostly because of that influx and the determination between the groundwater and surface water available to use. It mainly fluctuates more based on environmental conditions, so if we have a wet or a dry year versus pumping or use. And so we go into the next page, which talks about storage. So as we see those groundwater levels increase, that provides an increase of storage. And that's what this graph is looking at here and trying to depict. The colors behind the chart indicate the water year type. So your darker yellows are your dry and critical years. Your grays are somewhat neutrally above normal or below normal. And then, I'm sorry, I said that backwards. The blues are the wetter years. The yellows and grays are the drier years. So you can see how things change throughout that time. What we've also done is giving you an indication of how that cumulative change has moved throughout over the past 24 years, and then also a shorter time frame in the last 10 years. So over the last 24 years, about 1,000 acre foot increase per year. And if you looked at it just in a shorter time frame of 10 years, we've seen about a 2,000 acre foot increase per year over those years. So of the 3 subbasins that we work here in Butte County, this is the one that has a surplus if you look at cumulative storage compared to Butte and in the Vina subbasins that we work in. So that's a really good thing. Again, it goes through a few stats here with groundwater storage and gives some numbers. It talks about our other sustainability indicators, like making sure that there aren't any depletions of water from creeks and streams and what the GSA is doing towards that. It does have a section on groundwater quality. I head out every August, sample about 12 wells or so for salinity. We did have 2 of the multi-completion wells in one location that did see some exceedances this year near Lone Tree and Cox. However, that well was our new well. I don't know if you remember, but I came back to you about 3 years ago and said, we want to put this new well in. So when they drilled it back in 2021, when they first drilled it, it had these high numbers to begin with. So we're now looking at, trying to determine whether or not that's baseline conditions or if that's something that changes throughout the year as pumping changes. And we're going to be doing that with DWR by putting hourly or monthly monitoring data loggers in there to track that. So that'll be coming up soon as well. Subsidence is a non-issue in this subbasin as always, that we've seen. Last page here talks a little bit more about how the subbasin is on track to meet its 2027 interim milestones. As you recall, those are set every 5 years to gauge how the subbasin's doing with groundwater sustainability. We have a project spotlight on the fact that this board and GSA established a fee structure to fund long-term operations. And then some quick highlights on the projects and the $5.5 million that was granted from DWR. Just a quick highlight. The idea here is to somewhat be a teaser and get people to go read the actual annual groundwater status report on the website itself. But that's where a lot more detail, a lot more technical and narrative details about these projects are. And so with that, I'll open it up with any questions.
Questions?
I don't have
Thank you so much.
When will we release these, like, this will be an annual
Yes.
thing, when will this come out?
Yeah, good question. These are due to April 1st every year to the state. And so now that we've got the templates in place, we've got last year's and 2024's, I'm thinking it'll probably be about a month or so after, but it'll be a quicker turnaround this time. But they're currently on the website. And I believe Dylan might be working on like a professional printing of these, so glossy, handout at some point, but I'll let her work with you guys on that. Sure.
Yes.
I have a kind of a funny question, but why does our basin have that little piece north of the diversion canal between the forebay and the middle forebay? Just kind of an odd chunk added to our basin. It doesn't quite make sense.
I want to say that. It off, good one. I want to say that follows the Western Canal Water District boundary, but I'm not entirely sure if anyone else knows that off the top of their.
It's the north section of TWSD's
Oh,
boundary.
that's what it is.
Oh, it's yours.
Thank you.
It's just kind of odd. It's like out Wilbur Road and then
Yeah.
by Sugarloaf. And okay. Oh, then I guess the question begs is, why do you have that in your boundary? Why would you have that in your boundary?
You know, I don't know exactly why. It's actually in our sphere of influence, not our service area.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why that was set way back when LAFCO started doing the MSRs. That's part of our sphere.
Okay. All right, just curious. Any questions or comments from the public? I see Supervisor Kimmelshue joined us. You want to see how a good baseman goes, right?
You're setting a great example.
Yeah. All right, if there's no questions or comments, well, that was for information. We'll move on. Thank you very much. 5.2, consideration of groundwater sustainability plan periodic evaluation and amendments. Hi, good afternoon.
It's,
Okay, sorry. Becky Fairbanks, Sigmund Grant Project Manager. I'm just going to give a brief introduction of the topic you guys are going to hear today, and then I'll turn it over to Ryan Fulton, our consultant. So just a little reminder, we're here to talk about the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, or GSP, the periodic evaluation, and possible plan amendments. Back in 2022, we submitted our first official, the GSP, to DWR. So in January of 2027, we need to submit to them the periodic evaluation for the plan. And with these grant dollars, we're actually going to get that done by March of 2026. Today, what you're going to hear from Ryan, we're just going to take it one topic at a time. Today is just going to be about subsidence. He's going to kind of do a little overview of what we had in the groundwater sustainability plan discussing this topic, and then what DWR said in their corrective actions for us. And then you'll hear a couple of proposed amendments. What we're asking from you today is to either approve the proposed amendments or then provide direction to us.
Trying to get over this cold for 3 weeks.
All right, thanks, Becky. So I'm Ryan Fulton with LWA, and I'll be talking about the GSP evaluation amendments and specifically regarding subsidence. Go ahead, next slide here. So as Becky mentioned, I'll just give a brief recap of the GSP evaluation amendment process and then spend most of the time talking about subsidence and potential amendments regarding the SMCs for that indicator. Next slide. So what is a GSP periodic evaluation? It provides the GSA the opportunity to conduct a self-evaluation. It's an assessment of the subbasin's current conditions, including an evaluation on if project management actions are meeting the sustainability goal as outlined in the GSP or plan. It's required under the Water Code. It's due every 5 years from the time the plan was initially submitted. Your plan was submitted in 2022, so the evaluation is due in January of 27. And we'll be producing the final evaluation, all grant funded. So next slide. So what is a plan amendment? There's a lot of text on this slide, but essentially it's just a formal revision to the GSP. And it must be accompanied by an evaluation. So that's why we're doing it now, because we have grant dollars to try to improve your plan a little bit. Next slide here. So this is just a side-by-side comparison of a periodic evaluation and a plan amendment. Again, there's a lot of text, but the key takeaway from this slide is the plan amendment allows for updates to sustainable management criteria or SMCs. And SMC is a term used in the GSP regulations which describes the plan's sustainability goal, undesirable results, minimum thresholds, measurable objectives, and interim milestones. And I'll go over these terms on the slide coming up. Here we go. So today I'll be spending most of my time talking about land subsidence, but for the purpose of this slide, I'll be relating these terms to groundwater levels to be consistent with the illustration on the right side of this slide. But the same terms apply to subsidence. So measurable objectives, or MOs, is where you want to operate groundwater levels long-term. It's the green line on the figure. You can drop below the MO, but the goal would be to have the groundwater levels stabilize and then rebound up to the MO over time. Interim milestones, they're the blue triangles on the figure. They're targets set in 5-year increments to ensure that the subbasin is on track to reach sustainability. And then MTs, or the red line on the graph, this is where you want to avoid. You don't want groundwater levels to drop below that because that triggers an undesirable result, which means you have to implement projects or actions to increase back up to the MO area. So any questions on those terms, or feel free to ask questions as we go along here. Next slide. So there's 6 sustainability indicators. They're on your screen. Today I'll be talking about land subsidence. There'll be presentations specific to each of these indicators as we move forward over the next 7 to 9 months or so. So next slide here. So subsidence. So land subsidence is a gradual settling or sudden sinking of the Earth's surface. It can be caused by both natural processes and human activities. SGMA requires GSAs to manage and prevent subsidence caused by excessive groundwater pumping or depletion of the aquifer. There are 2 types of land subsidence, inelastic and elastic. Inelastic subsidence is permanent, irreversible sinking of the ground surface, and elastic subsidence is temporary and often seasonal, with the land sinking rebounding over time. So we want to prevent subsidence as it poses a risk to public infrastructure, including roads and canals and other waterways. So next slide here. So this slide was taken from a DWR presentation. It's a great example of what we want to monitor, but more importantly serves as an example as what we want to avoid in the Wyandotte Creek Subbasin. There are two areas in the Sacramento Valley that you may be aware of that are experiencing land subsidence. One is along I-5 in between Orland and Willows, and the other location is in the Arbuckle area. And this figure shows conditions in the Arbuckle area. So the red line is subsidence going back, pre-1940. And then the two blue lines are groundwater levels over time. And as you can see, groundwater levels dropped in roughly 2010. That's the same time that subsidence started to occur, substantial subsidence started to occur. And so this point, circled in green, this is often referred to as the critical groundwater level. And you don't want groundwater levels to drop below that point because, as you can see on the slide, subsidence occurs. And so we want to try to avoid that.
It's geology. They have a different geology.
They do, yeah.
So, what I'm just jumping ahead a little bit,
Yep,
why do
go
we
for it.
have to spend money to check for subsidence when we don't have the geology like clay,
Right.
like the San Joaquin, or they have over there?
Right.
Where, I mean, can we save money and just like say, hey, we haven't shrunk an inch in 100 years, we're not gonna,
Yeah.
instead of doing all these studies, or
Yeah.
they require us to do this just out of redundancy, or what's the deal?
Yeah, I mean, they want to ensure that you don't experience subsidence moving forward. DWR provides you the data sets free to be able to track. So it's not a cost to the GSA to.
Well, you still have to do a report,
Yeah,
which is ridiculous.
yeah. Once we have the report developed under the grant dollars, it would just be basically copy and paste moving forward. So it's
Okay.
not a real cost
So
to
we're
the
not
GSA.
gonna, you're not gonna go run around looking at LiDAR and all this stuff?
No,
and-
no, we're not.
Oh,
We're just going
okay.
to use the free,
No,
publicly available data.
I'll get off your butt then, I'm sorry.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, well, no, yeah. So, basically the take home from this slide is we want to be able to track groundwater levels with subsidence moving forward. So next slide.
Can I also add, it's one of the 6 indicators that we have to look at, and we already got rid of one with saltwater intrusion. So
Right.
we do have to look at it, and in the letter from DWR, it is one of the recommended corrective actions on how we look at it as well. So
Yeah.
But we
I know.
don't have, we're not going to have, and as far as saltwater intrusion, anywhere in a valley, if you dig deep enough, there's saltwater. I mean, so how do we get out of that? I guess we don't have any gas wells or
Minimum.
oil wells or
Well,
anything
yeah,
to bring it up.
it's more along the coasts and the areas that do have saltwater adjacent to their groundwater.
Right.
I'll be quiet where there's saltwater in Butte County, but there is some. All right, thanks. I'll shut up.
Okay.
I just don't want to waste money, that's all.
Right. Yeah.
I get it.
Okay. So what's in the GSP currently? So the GSP defines an undesirable result when groundwater pumping leads to changes in ground surface elevation severe enough to disrupt critical infrastructure or development projects in a manner that is inconsistent with the GSP's sustainability goal. Land subsidence typically occurs concurrently or shortly after significant declines in groundwater levels, and currently groundwater level SMC are used by proxy. The table on this slide shows historical subsidence going back to 2008. To your point, Director Connolly, there's really no subsidence in the subbasin, so this should be a fairly quick topic to go through.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next slide here. So DWR's corrective actions. They require subsidence to be measured directly using INSAR data instead of using groundwater level as proxy. As I mentioned earlier, INSAR data is free to the GSA and provides spatially distributed measurements of subsidence across the subbasin. Secondly, DWR wants the GSA to define minimum thresholds for the rate and extent of subsidence. And I'll go over this in a little bit more detail on the following slides. So GSP amendments. The map on the right shows cumulative subsidence from June 2015 through October of 2024, developed using the INSAR data. INSAR can measure subsidence within plus or minus roughly 1/10 of a foot. All the white shaded areas on the map have subsidence estimates within the INSAR level of uncertainty. And then the green shaded areas have subsidence between 0.07 foot and 0.25 feet. The graph on the lower left of the slide shows historical subsidence from a GPS station located along Highway 70 just west of Palermo. And as you can see, the ground-based GPS station is consistent with the INSAR data. So we recommend setting SMC for subsidence using INSAR. We will only use INSAR data where we have groundwater level information, so we can track subsidence and groundwater levels similar to the example I showed for the Arbuckle area. Because we want to be, if there is subsidence, we want to be able to relate that to a lowering groundwater level and not due to other natural causes. By the time the plan amendments are completed, we should have about 31 groundwater level monitoring sites across the subbasin, and these sites are shown on the map. They're the yellow and blue triangles on the map. So we'll update section 4.5 of the GSP regarding the monitoring network to track subsidence at these locations. So next we'll need to update land subsidence SMCs, or section 3.7 of the GSP. We have proposed two options for the board's consideration today regarding the SMCs. So option one, which is the next slide here, presents SMCs that are consistent with neighboring subbasins. So I'll just kind of run through the points in the figure real quick and then open up to input here. So the monitoring network, as I talked about earlier, will use the INSAR pixels near the groundwater level monitoring sites. There's roughly 31 sites across the subbasin, and an undesirable result will occur when at least 12% or 4 out of the 31 locations exceed their MT over a 5-year period. That is irreversible and is caused by lowering of groundwater elevations. Interim milestones will be set at 0.25 feet over a 5-year period. Measurable objectives will be set at 1 foot over a 20-year period. And then minimum thresholds will be set at 2 feet over a 20-year period. So the graph on the right, the black line shows historical subsidence going back to 2022. So if you just kind of imagine extending it out, extrapolating it out, you're most likely going to operate above the 5-year interim milestones and the MO. And by definition, the MO is kind of where you want to operate. So in this case, you're being really conservative, safe. You're not going to be in any trouble. And this is consistent with what your neighboring subbasins are doing. And that's maybe leads to the next slide here. So this is just a summary table of what Butte, Souther, and North Yuba subbasins are doing. It's very similar to what I presented on the other slide, where the MO is set at roughly 1 foot and then the MT is at 2 feet, with the interim milestones at 0.25 feet over a 5-year period. And then next slide here. So we wanted to give you a second option for consideration today. This is consistent with the Sacramento Valley goal of having 0 subsidence. Organizations like the Northern California Water Association, they're proposing having a 0 subsidence goal for the Sacramento Valley. It's essentially the same thing as option 1, but we're increasing the MO and the interim milestones to 0.1, which is roughly what you can measure subsidence within. So your long-term goal will be to operate right around that 0.1 mark, which historically is where the subbasin has operated, while your MT, undesirable result, is still 2 feet. So 2 options for consideration, one consistent with the neighboring subbasins, and then option 2 is consistent with this goal of having 0 subsidence across the subbasin. Staff, we've talked about it, and we recommend option 2, but open it up to board input and direction.
So what if there was an earthquake that caused settling of the strata underneath the ground? It had nothing to do with our water. Would there be an exemption on option two?
Yeah.
You have no leeway here at all, so it could happen. We have shakers here, and what if it settled 4 inches, nothing to do with water? Could they come back and penalize us and say
Yes,
exceeded it?
Sigma's intent is to prevent land subsidence caused by groundwater depletions or pumping.
Yeah, but would we, I'd
So we
rather
would
have,
just have
I'd
to
rather
show.
have the first option so that we don't have to mess with them if it's some minor thing like that.
Okay, that, I mean,
I mean, I'm trying to think ahead because
yeah.
Yeah.
what do you guys, what does the rest of the board think?
That was just a good question. Would we be penalized if it's something, an act of nature as opposed to groundwater pumping?
Yeah, I mean, that's why we're gonna be monitoring subsidence near our groundwater level locations. So we can say, you know, groundwater levels are stable, but we're still seeing subsidence in your example. So we would just say it's due to a, you know, a natural process such as an earthquake or erosion or, you know,
But they'll allow us to have the first option.
they will, that's what your neighbors are doing.
I think I'd rather have,
Okay.
I'd rather have some wiggle room. One thing about government, they can change their mind.
Were our neighboring basins using groundwater level as a proxy as well?
Previous, yes, yeah.
This is,
Yeah, they have, yep.
so what is staff recommending option two?
We recommended option two just because it's a Sacramento Valley goal. There's other areas in the Sacramento Valley that have subsidence, and DWR is taking a very strict stance with them and saying no, zero subsidence is allowable. And so our thinking was, well, let's use zero as the MO and IM. It's okay if you drop below it. I mean, you're not going to get in trouble until you get to that 2 foot mark. And you just kind of fly under the radar easier. We can at least say we're trying to be consistent with what others are doing in the Sacramento Valley. But you're not at risk until you get to that 2 foot mark.
But it'll be inconsistent with what is going on around us. Right?
Yeah, it's Colusa subbasin, more the west side of the valley where they're taking this zero subsidence more strictly. Yeah.
If we, real quick, if we do go with option two and everyone else is at option one, does that,
Yeah.
would we be, I can't remember exactly the terminology that was used, but infringe on their ability to meet their sustainability. I'm
Yeah, I
trying to-
do. And this subsidence being a little more localized versus groundwater pumping, let's say, yeah, because we can impact groundwater pumping or levels in another basin if we were pumping a lot, but so we can't control subsidence in their areas. With this, if let's say we were to set it at zero and there was an earthquake that for whatever reason it settled, it's going to have to be a pretty big earthquake if it wasn't related to the causes of groundwater pumping. So we haven't seen subsidence under the current conditions, including minor tremors here and there. So
Yeah.
you're probably okay with this. And it is within that little bit of range, like, right? Or just like point.
Yeah,
0
point
to
one is where
1,
you've
yeah.
historically been over the last at least 20 years or so, going back.
I mean, my preference would be go with option one just because it gives us even more of a
Yeah.
cushion.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume based on history to do more with all of these. So my preference would be start out and just kind of get by with what we can, and if it matches our neighbors, that would be my preference as well.
Yeah.
Has, with option one, have they been asked to change theirs as well? No? Okay.
No.
I have a
So-
question. What's
Yes.
the negative side to either one of these?
There really isn't a.
Is there a negative side to either one of them?
Not in my opinion. I mean, there's really historically been no subsidence in the subbasin, and you're safe on both of them. You don't have to start implementing project management actions until you get to 2 feet, and you're well above that. But the negative would be to, Kyle, Director Daly and Connolly's points is
Okay.
it just
Yeah,
gives
I
you
just-
more flexibility.
I like to have a cushion when I deal with government.
So there's more flexibility on
Option one.
option one,
Yeah.
but if we were to go with two, we would be much more compliant with.
We'd look
Yeah.
better.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so with option one, we would be susceptible at some point. It's not a matter of if it's going to happen, but when we're going to have to.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
Okay, I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
So
I just,
your argument is
I'd rather
more
have a
local control.
Yeah, more cushion. And
Yeah.
maybe it isn't an earthquake, maybe it's something else, I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Things happen, and I don't want,
Yeah.
Well,
and, the background to all this too is just the gross overpumping in the San Joaquin Valley and the subsidence down there where they pump the mud out and it's 60 feet and all this other stuff. That's the way government is. They kill every fly with a sledgehammer. And I feel like that's what they're doing to us. We don't have any, why do we even, to your point though, from now on, once we adopt this, it's just a rubber stamp, right? We don't have to go through all the science. You don't have to do a presentation every year.
right.
Spend all the money. But you know what I'm trying to say? We don't
No, we
need
do.
this.
Right.
But
Yeah.
We're not even near needing this anywhere in this basin.
Yeah.
Unless
Crazy.
something unpredictable,
So I'm just
extenuating
kind of
circumstance.
that way. I'd rather not give them 0. I'd rather have the latitude. That's better. We can vote on it, Any public comment on this matter? Come on up. How you doing, Jace?
I'm good. I'm Jace Rash. Most of you know who I am by now because I've popped my mouth off enough. One of the questions I have for you, Ryan, is did you, when you were considering what Bill's talking about, did you consider the increased maturity of the orchards in our little area and the demand they're going to have for water in the future? Because as trees grow, they need more water. And to Bill's point, that's just one more thing. We're seeing more orchards in the Lone Tree area, Cox Lane area, where that's year after year after year after year, and those trees are growing. So that's my only comment.
So the answer to that, we haven't run future scenarios where we've accounted for the potential increase of demand due to the orchards. One thing that the GSP does allow is adaptive management practices. And so as, the orchards mature more, you can bring on more recharge projects. You can try to sustain where levels currently are. So that's my response to
We're
that.
getting a little off track though.
Yeah.
Any questions about ground subsidence? All right, we're in a closed public comment. Wish to the board, somebody make a motion. We'll see if it passes.
I make a motion that we choose option one.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, call the roll. This is very controversial.
Director Daly?
Yes.
Director Goodson?
Vote your conscience.
Well, I don't mind coming back around and confrontation, so I'll go with option one.
That's an aye.
Director Richton?
Yes.
And Chair Connolly.
Hi. Wow, we got that one done. No, I don't want to have a report about this next year. I just want the rubber stamp on that sucker. Nothing. All right, here we go. Thank you. And to the point about if we start overdrafting out there, that's where we can go to the farmers and offer hopefully grants to individually trickle irrigate. There's all kinds of options available to us in the future. That's why I call it using like the devil's money, right? DWR thought they're going to find all this water, they're going to get more water from us, and really we're proving that we can sustain what we got, but we can't give you thousands of acres of our water. So that's, as long as I'm around, that's what we'll do. We'll make sure we don't deplete our groundwater. I think the rest of the board feels the same way. Next
Appreciate
up,
that, yes.
5.3, consideration of fiscal year 2025, 2026 annual operating budget.
Chair Connolly. So I've organized this discussion into two parts. So the first part is going to be focusing on this year's proposed fiscal year 2025, 2026 annual operating budget. And the hope is that we can either get that approved by the board and to have you direct staff to prepare a resolution for adoption on the corresponding fee at the June board meeting, or provide direction to staff. And then the second half is going to be more about a discussion on the long-term budget constraints and financial considerations. So because it's a slideshow, I recommend having this little packet out. It's going to start with the transmittal so that you can kind of look at the whole proposed budget as well as last year's estimated and then projected year-end budget. That might be helpful in the conversation, but so to go ahead and start, and the budget looks a little bit different from last year, and because it was larger, it's categorized into two different sections. So we have the GSA administrative expenses, and then we have the Sigma compliance costs. So last year, all of the Sigma compliance costs were covered by the grant, so they didn't show up on that budget the way that it's going to show up today. So I'll go ahead and I'll start with the GSA administration expenses. And so this on the screen right now on that first slide, that is the proposed budget. It's the budget that's on your, in the packet. But I thought it would be good to go ahead and kind of look at what we estimated last year, what we actually spent, and then what we're proposing for this year. So I'm not going to go over every line item, but just kind of the ones that might stand out a little bit more. To go ahead and start with the audit, I think last time I had mentioned that item is going to be substantially higher this year than it was in the previous years. It's also quite a bit higher than it'll be in the future years. That is because, again, the first audits that we did the first 4 years, those were biannual audits. They were for smaller budgets, so they were a lot cheaper to do. Now for this year, we have to pay for 2 annual audits, and the first one being 23-24, and then for the fiscal year 24-25. So each one is about $18,500. So originally, that number up there in the proposed was going to be $37,500. That's gone down. We did not spend as much in that category last year, so that covers some of this year. That's kind of got it to go down a little bit. So I know it's kind of a jarring number. It's don't expect it won't be like that for in future years. The next one I do want to bring up is the program manager expense. So we estimated last year that was going to be about $50,000. We project that it's really going to be more around $45,000, though we do see that there will be an increase in that in the coming years. So that's why that's raised over there. And then also for a cost that went a little bit over. And what's nice about this budget, most of the line items we were under. This was one of the few that went over, and that was because of the tax roll. That was a little bit more complicated last year due to some of the miscalculations, which we'll talk about a little bit further down the line. And we expect that fee to be a little bit higher this time around too, because we're still dealing with that issue, but it could be less, but we're projecting. So that'll probably be pretty standard moving forward. Also, just so I know it's a little confusing, there's that irrigated, non-irrigated implementation cost, the county, and then the county tax support. That $3,500 accounts for the 30-cent charge per parcel that the county does for just putting it on the tax roll. So
Is now a good time to ask a question?
you can ask questions whenever.
Okay, the program manager, you're asking for a $20,000 increase?
So it's going to be a $15,000 increase, and so we are seeing that there's going to be increased budgets, especially with negotiations going on with the county. So
Okay, and what's the increase going to cover?
just the program manager salary.
Okay, but just strictly salary?
That, I think that also.
With benefits.
And benefits, yeah. So
That's
salary
just-
and benefits.
Just salary and benefits. That doesn't cover travel expenses, anything like that?
That would be under supplies, so no.
Okay.
Okay. And then some other ones that will be rising just in the administration is going to be insurance. That's because of the groundwater monitoring network. We now have to insure those wells that we'll be installing. And then website is a little bit higher just because it's based on our annual budget. That's quite high right now because of the Sigma grant, so we're in the millions. So I do want to also point out those, the legal defense reserve and the future fee study reserve. So those are full, we did not spend that. That is in a special reserve like bucket. So if you look at the proposed budget, you'll see on the top in that reserve spot, we have $165,000 in our reserve. So, and then I like to think of that as our savings account. So that is specific money we put aside. Last year we had 95,000 when we added an additional 70,000 there. Some good news is that,
I just wanted to go back to the program manager. That's a $15,000 increase, correct? So is that a two-step? Did we?
that is a one step, and also the union negotiations will have an extra additional COLA increase to that, so.
All right. Thank you.
And so
Go
then.
ahead.
Huh?
Go ahead.
Oh, and then a positive part of this is beyond just that reserve that we have a $150,000 rollover. So that is just how much money we had left after the reserve and is in our checking account. So with that being said, because we
Nice.
have such a high projected rollover account, I wanted to also present you a budget where we took out some items to try and lower it a little bit in case that was something that the board was interested in. So one of those being those legal defense reserve and the future fee study reserve. So if you look at the last one, the item, the proposed administration expenses would be $205,000. If we wanted to take out those reserves, we could decrease that by $170,000. So that is an option that we could do. So with that being said, that was the GSA administrative costs. So that one is a little bit easier to compare because a lot of those line items are going to be similar from what we had last year and the years before. For Sigma compliance, it's a little bit more difficult to compare. One, because the grants have been covering those items. Two, we don't have those items listed in that way on the past budget. And also because a lot of these items are still in the development stage. So we don't have, they're not, when we actually have them on our budget, there'll be more maintenance fees than there'll be like digging wells, and those are creating those systems. So, but you can see here, even though all those line items are on there, it's going to be a very limited cost due to the fact that most of these items will be covered by the Sigma grant this year. The one thing that has been added that was not related to the Sigma grant or to last year's budget would be that grant procurement line item. That item has been added in case there's potential grants that we see and we want to apply for. So we went ahead and added that. So kind of seeing now where we're at with both of those. So the total fee setting budget So the GSA, and this is again, the budget presented, this isn't the reserves, without the reserves, is, for GSA administration is $205,000, with the Sigma compliance, being $26,500, with a total of $231,500. So that would be the budget that we would use to, set the fee. And if you were to approve that number, this slide shows us what the fees would be. So if you went through with the proposed budget, non-irrigated would be 92 cents per acre. Irrigated surface water would be $8.42, with irrigated groundwater being $13.24 per acre. And so these rates are based on the updated equation based on the Proposition 218 methodology that was passed. And so we are able to cover that under, so right now, based on the updated equation, we know that we can, our top amount would be $252,000, so we're able to fund that. So now, looking at that account that I showed without the reserves in it, that would lower that GSA administrative line item to, or category to $170,000. The Sigma compliance category, that would stay the same at $26,500. So the subtotal would be $196,500. So that would dramatically, taking that reserve, saves about $35,000. And then the fee, this is a comparison, so all the way to the right, that's going to be last year's fee. The middle is going to be the fees with the reserve, and then in the middle there to the left is going to be with no reserve. So the non-irrigated would be 78 cents per acre, irrigated surface water at $7.16, and then the irrigated groundwater at $11.24. I do want to point something out here because this might be a little confusing when you see how the rates could be higher this year, even though our budget would technically be lower than was approved last year. I'll go into a little bit more detail later about that, but that is because in the 2023 fee report, there was a miscalculation of assessable acres. So when we came to you to set the budget last year, we were basing it on the original equation, and then we found later that that equation was no longer valid since it had miscalculated those acres. So that kind of brings us into the second part, and I wanted to bring the first requested action. This was more to help me realize when the second part of the presentation was coming, but our first requested action is going to be to approve a budget or to provide direction. So we can either do that now with that information, or we could kind of put that more towards the end after we talk a little bit more about the financial considerations from just the changes that we've seen.
I have a question, and maybe I'm confused. On the proposed groundwater fees, correct me if I'm wrong, but are we jumping over an allocated dollar amount to the 26 allocated dollar amount? And is that like a Prop 218 issue or anything like that?
No, so the Prop 22, or so under the Prop 218, the maximum amount budget that we could get for a fee setting amount would be $252,000. So that is the max amount. That's if we did the max fee.
Okay.
So we have not reached that. We're well below that.
Okay, so we're okay there.
We're okay this year.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
So repeat your question.
So so there's going to be two requested actions. So again, this presentation is kind of in two sections. The first one is, here is the 2025-26 proposed budget.
Right.
And do you want to go ahead and approve that proposed budget? We could make edits. And then once you make that decision, if it is to approve a budget, it'd be to direct staff to prepare a resolution to bring in June to set the fees and to approve that budget.
Right, or you said we can wait for financial
And so the second part
considerations.
of the presentation is going to be about the financial considerations. So there are a couple things going on in the GSA that we want the board to be aware of and to discuss so that staff knows how to move forward.
I would like everything in totality.
got it.
So, you're talking
What do you
about
think?
doing away the reserve for the legal fees, but I don't think we're out of the woods yet. I mean, there's still pending lawsuits and other GSAs, and I think it would be prudent to have money available, because if we do get sued,
Right.
or somebody challenges us in some way, we're prepared. I'd feel more comfortable if everybody else was settled, at least within the county.
So again,
What does staff think about that? I mean,
We had
really.
brought that up the last time we visited this, and we thought the fee was too low, and we upped it, and so
So,
I'm in
right.
agreement.
We don't have to add to it necessarily, but.
Right,
No, so the proposed, the reason I offered that one is because we do have, so the reserve, we have $165,000, and then it's that rollover amount of $150,000 that we have extra. So that will, once we have that in our accounts, that'll go back into a reserve and we'll build it. So where we were kind of seeing is if there is a spot to make any adjustments that we feel that there could be easily, that would be where to go. But that doesn't mean we don't have to have the reserve. We just wanted to show you what that option looked like, especially because we are in a space where we have that excess rollover.
yeah. Unrestricted funds, but right?
I believe it would just, it goes into a reserve.
It's
so-
the reserve. I still want to see a figure amount.
For-
A figure amount for
Okay.
illegal.
That's why we wanted to just give you both options so you could see them. So we did lower that from the last year, so we had it at
Right.
50,000. We did lower it to 25,000.
25.
So we could move it back to 50,000. Also though.
I just think we have to keep it. I mean, too many things can happen between now and another year or so.
So I have two mottos that I live by. One, I'm not going to tell you, but this one is, when in doubt, there is no doubt.
So then I guess,
You made me laugh.
so the other aspect would be then that future fee study reserve, which last year we had $20,000 saved for that. We took that out because we also potentially did set aside $100,000 from the Sigma grants to do a potential fee study if we wanted to, if the board chose to do that. I think that that's a good discussion to have after looking at some more of those considerations that are a couple slides down too.
All right, so basically, I can open public comment on the budget in general, which we can change and modify in the future, and then you want us to approve it after that, and then you're gonna get into more details. Is that what you're trying to do?
No, honestly, I had that requested item there because I kept forgetting what my slide was to divide the conversation. So we can save that one to the very end. A lot of it was just placement for me, but I figured I'd give you the option if you wanted to, but we could save it to the end.
Okay, why don't you finish your presentation?
All right. So if you look here, now it's kind of going into where we're at financially as a whole, not just into the next fiscal year. So looking at our budget from last year, you'll see that so the board approved a budget of $206,200. We had provided a fee with that based on an equation that we had received from the 2023 fee report. So while we were preparing the tax roll, that's when we realized that there was a miscalculation and that report had overestimated the amount of assessable acres in the basin. So because of that, that means we are projecting that we will only really receive about $180,000 in fees this year. So again, we project that we are actually spending under that approved budget and will only be spending about $192,000 this year. So while there's still that $10,000, $12,000 shortfall, we're not too concerned. We still have a rollover. So even with the shortfall, we're still in good standing. Let's see here. So what caused the shortfall? So again, the 2024 budget and 2025 budget, it was, the fee levels were calculated using an equation that was derived from that 2023 fee report, which unfortunately it overestimated the number of accessible acres in the subbasin, so we ended up collecting less and we're unable to collect that amount based on those fees. So as a result, the total amount collected was lower than projected, but luckily, again, we were still under budget and we had some rollover to cover that. So some more financial considerations that we see coming in for the GSA is that the Sigma costs will shift into the GSA's operating budget. So previously covered by the Sigma grants, costs such as annual reporting, groundwater monitoring, and other compliance activities are the GSA's direct responsibility. So that Sigma compliance category I was showing before, it was lower. That is so low because the grant's covering it right now. That's not going to be the case starting in 2027, the fiscal year 26, 27, yes.
Good.
And then also, operating costs are increasing, increased reoccurring expenses like the annual audits. Those have increased, website maintenance, program manager, insurance. Also, the increased groundwater monitoring costs due to the expansion of the groundwater monitoring. So we suggest that once we take that on, it's going to be about $73,000 a year. Additional budget items that weren't quite included in the 2023 fee report would be the litigation defense reserves, as well as the fee study. So those reserves weren't accounted for when they did the original report. And again, one of the biggest considerations here is that miscalculation of the accessible acres, which is going to have the biggest effect there. So again, the highest amount we can collect in fees is going to be $252,000 based on that report. And if we, right there. So looking ahead, so some of those potential constraints in future planning. We're good this year. We are covered. We are not worried about this year. The current fee structure, we should be able to cover all of our costs in the budget. Though revenue capacity is capped, again, at about $252,000 per year, based on the updated accessible acreage calculation, we do project that expenditures in future years are expected to exceed that cap. Again, some of those key drivers is going to be just increased reoccurring administrative costs, and then also that monitoring network. So with that, our hope is the requested action is to provide direction to staff on long-term budget constraints, but the hope is that the board could, one, now you understand the situation, and some of the different considerations we're looking at when we're looking into the future. I think, as you know, we contracted with Hansford's Economic Consulting to talk about kind of putting what the VINA GSA has approved a fee structure. We wanted to see what that fee structure would look like in the Wyandotte Creek GSA. But I think it was important that, one, you had this information and were able to digest it first and see kind of like how we want to proceed with that being said. So that's kind of the goal for today. Can I make any questions or clarifications I can help with?
Clear as mud. So I guess,
Like 2 or 3 meetings ago when we were talking about expanding that monitoring network, I was talking about is that one line item is going to just balloon our budget, and it's going to be kind of in perpetuity, and so we're kind of stuck with that now, and it's not there yet, but it's coming now, and unfortunately, we just keep spending money and we keep adding more and more to it, and it's kind of frustrating.
well, there's two things weren't mentioned. We can apply for grants. We don't know what they look like going forward, but there'll be some. Hopefully, if we're good and within compliance, we can get money for that, because government seems to want to help you if you're bad, right? But then the other thing you and I have discussed, and I mean, might as well talk about it here, is if we don't have any problems, we don't have to monitor every single well every year. You know what I'm saying? If we've proved that we're good, why would we spend money checking things that are good.
My limited experience in this world says that that's gonna be harder to pull off than.
Well, we can
think.
try though.
You know, it just, it
I mean,
seems like-
the other things, we don't have the money, we don't have the money. I don't think anybody's gonna vote us more money.
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, that would be my
Right, I
preference.
mean,
is
so-
that we try and make the budget match what our, fee structure currently will sustain. And, you know, we've talked to a lot of stakeholders and a lot of landowners, not just in the ag world, but, you know, in the kind of residential area as well, that, you know, when we were approving this fee structure, we were discussing with them about this thing will come down, we have the capability to do that. And that was the way that we kind of couched it. And I feel like if we change that, it'll be a little bit of a bait and switch on those people. And so you know, my inclination would be to keep it somewhere in the ballpark of where we're at and try and make the budget match that. So we're not going out and trying to find more money. We make do with what we're currently collecting.
But if you get a grant, you're good with that, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
All right, so, any other questions or comments?
give any-
Let's open public comment. Anybody want to come up and talk about this?
With our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, dude.
Sherwood, just had a couple questions. I need a refresher course on what the Prop 218 funds are? Is that annual? Is that where the taxes or the fee that's coming from? That's the annual
Yes, so that's how we collect.
from the assessable acres?
Yes.
Okay. So, and the Sigma Round 2 grant, that is annual as well?
So that is a one-time one-time grant. So we received about 5.5 million. We don't receive it all at once, so we have to do invoicing, and so we get it quarterly. So we do quarterly invoices, and then they approve it and they send it back to us. So generally, we do that kind of by the year, but it's not just a one lump sum. It's based on,
So our expenses are going,
expires, yes.
the expenses for this program is going to continue, obviously.
So the grant is paying for a lot of the development of some of these items. So one of
Right.
those would be, even though the groundwater monitoring, the maintenance cost, it is higher, but we're not actually paying to have the wells installed. For the data management system, we're not going to have to pay for a new data management system. A lot of those line items are just going to be continued, it's just going to be the maintenance of those items that we're starting with those projects.
Is that state funded or is that federal?
The Sigma is from the state.
So when state goes broke, then what are we going to do?
So this Sigma grant expires in March of 2026. So we
Okay.
have to have all of these projects that were approved completed by March 26. So after that, it'll just be about maintaining, except for, like, we will still have to do the annual reporting. We'll have to do periodic evaluations. Those are the items that we would have to do no matter what. We will always have to turn in an annual report. It's just for the first couple of years, DWR was funding, that grant was funding it, and it won't be funding it after March of 2026.
Okay. And the accessible acreage, that's everybody in our, what are we?
Sphere of
there?
influence.
Wyandotte Creek.
In our-
Everybody
Yes.
in there, and that's City of Oroville. So is the City of Oroville paying fees as well? And just like on the park and like Sierra Pacific's paying fees down,
So all
and I'm
of,
sure they're using groundwater down there.
Everybody but state ground and tribal lands.
Okay.
yeah, federal, and then there's a couple of, like, if a certain parcel is under, its value is under a certain amount, so there's some exceptions, but generally, yes, all accessible
Okay.
acres.
My last question is, have you guys collaborated with Public Works on, I would like to, and I know there's some friends of mine would like to build some retention basins so we can recharge. Have you guys been to Public Works, and is there any mechanism? Because, you know, if we build a reservoir, I'm sure we need permits. Have you guys collaborated with them to come up with a plan what needs to be done if we want to do that, if we want to make some recharge?
So that would, from my understanding, and I don't necessarily, I'm not the project manager for these Sigma projects. I'm not aware of the direct collaboration on reservoirs with Public Works. I believe, yeah, Becky, do you mind?
Thank you.
Fred.
You are on,
It's getting it.
there you go.
Sorry, I always think the light means that it's on. But yeah, so Becky Fairbanks again, Sigma Grant Project Manager. To answer his question, we are going to collaborate with Butte County Public Works. We're not sure exactly what it's going to look like, but it is for that surface water supply and recharge project. Our first goal is to kind of start clearing away ditches because that's where a lot of the issues are. But we do have landowners that are willing to put the recharge retention basins on their property. So that's definitely something that we are considering.
Yeah, there is some collaboration between, because the drainage system in Palermo is terrible. You know, it was laid out without a drainage system years ago, and so you put the water somewhere, you can't have a negative impact. So that means if you bring the drainage out of Palermo over to Wyman's or wherever, you're going to have retention basins to take on the excess water so that you got to have a flood pool, and they could be multi-use, a recharge, and you could even say bird watching could be included. So moving forward, I'm hopeful that we'll get several of these retention ponds built downstream. And that will prevent flooding below there, like on you. So there is some cooperation, but in doing this 20 years, it's all planning now. I want to see shovels in the ground. I'm getting us off track a little bit. But. All right, so we're on the budget. Is there any other comments on the budget?
Bill, real quick, I do have.
No, I'm going to close public comment. Okay, public comment's closed. You can talk all you want. It's the big pay you get up here.
So even if we move forward with the proposed budget, would essentially be 231,500. If we max out going forward the current fee structure at 252,000, if we max it out on each of the tiers and collected $252,000, once that monitoring network comes online, we will not be able to, we won't be able to collect enough funds currently the way that it's set. So we're already kind of.
In the hole.
It's a concern if it could, we could try and make it, that's definitely a direction you can give us, is try and make the 252,000 work. I will say that it very much limits our options in case something like that does happen, where it is the 73,000 every year, and it does limit the options. It doesn't mean it's not possible. It's just not something I would sit up here and guarantee that I can say for certain that in the next 5 years we're not going to go over that. I think one of the considerations that we do have on our side is that we have set aside $100,000 for a fee study. That doesn't mean we have to use it, but if that is a concern that we see, we could potentially use that $100,000 now, and that doesn't mean that the board has to, even if we can raise them higher, it seems like that's not the priority of this board, and the board would not.
I think that's more towards my point. That we might need
I
to
think
get some more.
if I may, I think the priority of this board is to make do with what we've got, because we don't have a bad problem. We just keep it monitored and healthy and work within our means. We don't need to, and do some of these projects that might recharge some and even make us more healthy. But it was a carrot and a stick. I mean, the carrot was be in control of your own destiny, or the state would come in and do it and put meters on your wells. I mean, so I think we're healthy. We shouldn't be talking about raising any fees. We should be talking about working within our means. And as long as we're healthy, they ought to leave us alone. I mean, and then if we can do these projects and make it even better, that's great.
I agree.
I agree.
So I think if you want direction from us, I don't think there's a person up here that wants you to do a fee study and look at raising the fees.
Oh,
It'd be
no.
different if we were in, we were losing groundwater, we were in bad shape, or, but historically, this has been a pretty healthy basin, and we got cooperation from everybody. We go raising fees, we're not gonna have cooperation, this room's gonna be full.
And I do want to make, the direction doesn't have to be do a fee study or don't do a fee study. The other direction could be try and give us a clear budget of what you think, like provide a 5-year projection of, like, try and do your best to do a 5-year projection and see if that $252,000 is plausible based on projects and where we see it going. Like, we don't have to make that decision of we're doing the fee study. That doesn't have to be direction. We can have increments in between. And I do think that we're having Hansford Economic Consulting coming next, at the next meeting. And something that she did for Vina is that she would provide what a 5-year projection would look like.
Okay.
And I think, again, a lot of what we're trying to do in this, and why I didn't have her come today, is we wanted to give you all of the information and I didn't want to like give you all this information and be
blindside,
like,
right.
here you go, now
Okay.
tell, I wanted to give us some room
Thank
to,
you.
one, understand and to discuss it.
And I think that's more to my point, not necessarily that we need a new fee study, it's just that, just simple math, if we aren't making careful decisions, we're not very far away from not being able to fund everything that we're spending money on, and it's, once that monitoring network comes online, we're real close to that if we
Right.
move forward with this proposed budget, so.
But if we're healthy, maybe we can cut back on some of it.
Oh, Lord. Okay, so I think we're on the verge of working with, I call it scared money. So, but I'm optimistic as well.
All right, so what do you want from us? You
May I
want a
add
motion?
something just as a note? The RMS wells that are identified in the GSP, those are the ones that we will continue to monitor long-term. And Ryan can correct me if I'm wrong, but the additional items to the monitoring network that we're getting as part of this, we don't have to monitor after a certain period of time, correct? So, like, to the point of
So,
you, Director Daly, that we talked about it, but we're not obligated long-term to do it. So at some point, if there is more money, then we can continue with the new things. But we do have to at least monitor what we have in the GSP, and the county and DWR does do that currently. So there's not an additional cost there. But the new things, it would be nice to be able to
expanded
monitor,
one.
right? But, and I will say that future grant funds would not cover pretty much that O&M. So, and what Ryan presented during his presentation a couple meetings ago was an estimate and of what that would be, and we can look at that over time to see if, this time next year, is that really the cost when you're adopting the budget for 26, 27, and seeing if we can get within that, the 252,000. I think the other point that Dylan was also trying to make is the way the assessable acreage is and the calculation that was used isn't correct. So it doesn't really always get us to where we need to be. So if there needs to be a correction there, I think perhaps when Catherine Hansford comes next month, we can talk about some of those issues as well, a little more deeply.
So there won't be grants for operations, but there'll be grants available to improve our situation, which seems to me logically we'd need less monitoring. If we put recharge in and
Oh, that-
our groundwater is rising, I mean,
right. Ideally.
yeah, so I think the glass is half full without raising anybody's fees or anything.
Thank you for that added, yeah, it kind of.
Okay, what do you
lowered the
want?
stress
What do you want, a
level.
motion and a,
So
Sure.
maybe what I can see as direction, or what I think would be a good thing to bring next time would be a more detailed of the future considerations,
5-year.
especially a 5-year projection. What we think, again, with the accessible acres, is that 252 going to work, or is there any reason that couldn't work? And I think that another part of that is us trying to make it work. That should be the priority. And I think that's something we can go into that conversation of how can we make that work and where. So is that, I could take that as direction and kind of add that to the HEC line, agenda item for next time.
But you'd
And I need a, if
you'd
this.
like for us
yeah.
to approve.
And I need you to
Right.
approve
So
the
what you
budget.
said right there, and approve the proposed fiscal year 25-26 annual operating budget.
Somebody second that. That was a motion.
Would we be then this budget?
Yeah, but we can change it. That's the point. We're just approving the idea of it,
Yeah.
not,
Yeah, so
And
next,
she's bringing back next month.
we do the same thing at the
Additional
county.
information with-
If you're confused, I am too, so.
So we're proposing this, okay.
so you're essentially telling me like, yes, this budget looks good, bring a resolution to us in June. And then in June, that's when you decide, this is the budget, this is the fee.
Okay. Well,
The from what I'm hearing, you're asking for the.
Go ahead, what?
proposed-
okay, sorry. I mean, frankly, I think it's a lot of money that I would rather us try and pull it back to closer to what we are currently doing because it's just gonna keep going up. And so if it's now or in June, it's probably gonna be a no for me. And that's, you know, not contrary or anything, but, so anyways,
Conservative.
yeah, so, just because I would prefer to bring this back, so we aren't raising the rates is my inclination, so.
So are there line items that you would like us to specifically look at lowering?
Specific, like compared to our 24-25, I'm looking at this.
Okay.
We had an approved $206,000 budget, but because our fee structure is wrong, we didn't actually collect that much money.
Right.
Okay. So even if I were to say, can we bring back last year's budget?
You could so the budget, the actual budget is different than the fees. So the budget is what helps determine the fee. But what happened last year is we had a faulty equation because that equation had a miscalculated amount of accessible acres. So we
Right.
have fixed that problem.
Right.
And that we now know at least how many accessible acres we have. So I do also want to bring to light that the classification we understood might also, that is what LSCE is going to be contracted to do, is look at that and make sure that and be able to provide a repeatable methodology for those acres. So based on the equation that we have that was used last year, if you give us the budget can be determined very easily. Like if you approve the budget, that's separate. We have to then determine based on that budget what the fees are. If you say like on one of my slides, I showed you what the fees were, that would be where there's not a lot of flexibility because that's just how yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah. Okay.
So some of the items that are going to be directly different from last year, if you wanted to look at them, is that grant procurement was $15,000. So that was money that we put in case there are grants, and we want to hire a consultant to help us with getting those grants. Another item that unfortunately just is what it is that audit number is going to be $27,000. That's just how much we have to pay for it.
And it's a 4/5 vote to get it through, but.
It's a
so-
4/5 to get the resolution through. So
And we have
Today's direction.
a motion and a second,
Okay.
and I'm going to stay in my lane.
Okay, so motion and second, so that means that we just go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry, sorry.
okay, I will do call.
we need to have a vote though.
Can we review the motion real quick, just for me? And I may have a question for our legal counsel, Josh, who I was checking to see is on. What
Okay.
is it to change the budget
Well,
or?
we got additional feedback
Okay.
after the motion and the second. So we approved the proposed and with the resolution, to prepare a resolution for adoption of the fee.
Okay. Josh, I don't know if he can hear me, but I have a question about the fee and the 218. And so I think we'll bring it back, but I think we're going to confer with legal counsel as to whether or not we can skip over or change from year to year than what was proposed in the original fee study in the 218. So,
And I'm here if you want me to
yeah.
go ahead and answer.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Um, the fee study set a max fee, and as long as whatever fee is being proposed for the particular year, it's within the approved amount, you can go ahead and adopt up to that fee. And so even if you've taken, the board decided to use a lower fee in a previous year, as long as you've got the authorization and the approval of the fee study for up to the maximum, you can charge up to that maximum.
In that year or overall? It can just be overall.
I mean, as long as the maximum is authorized for that year, then yes, you can take up to the maximum. And
Okay.
there's no requirement that you do it in a stepped fashion.
Okay,
If-
thank you. We had a question from one of our management committee members, and I think I think the concern is, and maybe to answer Chris's concern, is that depending on the way a 218 is adopted at the time of a fee report being adopted, sometimes the maximum fee is adopted, which is what we did, and then we can change it each year. Thermalito may have only adopted the fee for each annual budget year, and that's why you guys have to go through a public hearing every year. I'm guessing that that's why, but we adopted the maximum fee when we did the fee study. So, with that, does that maybe answer your question, Director Riston? Okay.
You're on.
Oh, I'm on, okay.
You-
There we go. That was the question I had, is we adopted the grand total, or the highest fee, even though we had increments getting up to it. So we
Yeah.
could jump an increment if we wanted to, because we had adopted the total one. Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
You're welcome.
I got a question for legal counsel. Do you think it's wise to have some money in reserve in case of litigation? That's for legal counsel.
Director Conley, I hate to give you the lawyer answer, but, if the board thinks there's some risk out there still, and there certainly might be, we continue to see Sigma litigation, it probably makes sense to have something in reserve. Unfortunately, as I'm sure you know from your overall experience with local government, anybody with a lawyer can file a lawsuit, and litigation can be very expensive. So having a contingency available is a pretty good idea, just given the general state of Sigma.
Thank you. I think we should keep some of that, at least.
I think we all can agree on that.
Like the 160, but don't have to add to it or something. I'm trying to look for money. Somebody.
Well, you look no further. 160.
All right, so we still haven't voted on,
No,
That's my fault, sorry.
that's all right.
Okay.
Is it clear?
So
I,
So the clarification is that to approve the budget for 231,500 and you're directing staff to bring a resolution to the corresponding meeting with the.
June meeting.
Okay.
And we also want like a 5-year projection as
And a
best you can do.
You got it. All right. Roll call, Director Daly? Okay. Director Goodson?
Yes.
Director Riston?
Yes.
Chair Connolly?
Yeah, just because it's necessary.
Then I have a question for,
I don't,
yeah, so so for Josh, I know that we need a supermajority to pass a resolution, but I do think it's in our bylaws that we need a supermajority to pass a budget.
Budget.
So
right.
does that mean, do we have to wait
for Bill?
until the next meeting to
Item?
do that, or?
No, when you have a supermajority requirement, if there's less than a full board, you just need a unanimous vote. The other thing to point out is this is not the actual budget approval. It's just
Direct.
simply a motion to direct you to bring back the budget at X level. So this does not require the supermajority. The resolution next time will.
It will.
Thank you.
This is kind of like a first reading.
So does anyone plan on not being here in June? Just-
Everybody needs to be here.
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Well, and again, as a reminder, if there are less than the full 5 members, as long as the vote is unanimous, that will be sufficient.
so right now you got nothing because we
I
haven't.
have direction. So I have direction to move forward with that budget, even though it's not approved
Okay.
yet. But it'll be the budget that I use to make the resolution with the corresponding fees. And so also the direction to provide that 5-year projection and to look at the budget a little bit more closely.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to reports and correspondence, GSA manager update. Dylan.
It's very short. We are going to have, I already have it on your calendars, but at one point we mentioned that we will most likely have a June meeting. We will have a June meeting. It'll be a
Yes.
special meeting, so that's all I have to report back to you today on that.
Okay. We have a report on the well permit summary, which we don't have to do anything with that. Okay, now we're at public comment. Anybody from the public can speak on anything not on the agenda. We can't take action, but you're welcome to come speak to us. I see no public interest for that. And I think we're going to be adjourned till June 26th, 2 p.m. right here.